There's a couple different ways of selecting different fonts in Sure Cuts a Lot, so let's show you how to do that. The first way to select a font is by clicking on the Type tool. Okay, when we do that, pay attention to the Properties window on the right-hand side. Okay, you'll see here that there's a font drop-down, and clicking on this drop-down will actually display all of the fonts on your system. And you can actually see a little preview of what that font looks like. So selecting a font is as easy as clicking on this drop-down and then clicking on the font that you want to use. In this case, I'm going to select Impact. Now, if you take your cursor over the mat, you'll know that you're using the Type tool because your cursor will turn into crosshairs with a letter T on it. Okay, and you can use your cursor to pinpoint the location that you want to start your type. So I'm going to click right here, and I'm going to type the word home. Now I'm going to grab my selection tool. I'm going to click on that, and doing so gives me all these handles. Okay, so I can go ahead and click and move home. I can stretch it, make it bigger. Now if you hold down the Shift key while you stretch this, it will keep it in proportion. I'm holding down Shift, okay? Now if I let go of Shift, watch what happens. I can skew it however I want. But if I click Shift again, okay, it locks it in proportion. Now that's one way of doing it. You don't have to do it this way. You can also click on the Keep Proportions button. You need to make sure that your word is highlighted. Okay, if I click on Keep Proportions, and now I'm not holding down Shift. If I resize it, it will keep it in proportions. Okay, so there's a couple ways of doing that. You can use this button here, which I recommend, or if you uncheck this and hold down Shift, it does the same thing. Okay, so that's just a little tidbit there. Another quick thing I'm going to show you here is just a simple copy and paste. Okay, let's say you want two of these. Okay, I'm going to take and go to Edit. Now you want to make sure that your item is selected. This can be text, it can be an object from a library, it can be an SVG file, it can be any of the above. So we click on Edit, and we go to Copy, and then we go back to Edit, and we click Paste, and it creates a duplicate of the item that we just had highlighted. Okay, now we can do whatever we want with it. In addition to the copy and paste, under the Edit menu here, you'll also notice that there's a Paste in Place. Okay, and what that does is if we go ahead and highlight our item, we'll go to Edit, Copy, and then Edit, Paste in Place. Okay, what that does is it pastes it in the exact same place that we copied it. Okay, so if you want to copy and paste something and you don't want it to move, okay, this is the way to go, because you'll see if I move this a little bit, there it is. Okay, put it right on top of what we copied. Okay, so let me just illustrate this again with a different object. Let's use this circle here that I'm pulling from the library. Okay, if I do Edit, Copy, and then Edit, Paste, kind of moves it off to the side a little bit. But if I do an Edit, Copy, and Edit, Paste in Place, it basically replicates it on top of itself. So either way you want to do it is fine. Just you've got the options, you can use them. Okay, now another thing I want to show you here is I'm going to delete everything here. In addition to the copy and paste options, there's one other option in here called Paste Autofill. When you use that, it basically tells Sure Cuts a Lot to take the object that you're trying to paste, figure out how many times it's possible for it to paste it on the mat without overlapping, without going over the side, so that you can get as many cuts out of it as possible. Okay, let me just show you what I mean by that. I'm going to go ahead and click on Import SVG. I already have an SVG file ready for me here. So I'm going to take it, I'm going to make it about this big. You always want to make sure that any element that you have on your mat, you want to keep it within these dotted lines here. Okay, anything outside that dotted line is going to get cut off, so you don't want to do that. All right, so now just by eyeing this, I want to say that this will probably fit on the mat no more than about 8 times, maybe less. So what I'm going to do is with it highlighted, I'm going to go to Edit, Copy, and then Edit, Paste Autofill. Okay, and there you go. Okay, so I was pretty much right on there. It's going to fit about 8 times. I'm going to delete this shape by just clicking Delete on my keyboard. And you'll notice now that we've got it 8 times. Okay, so if you really look at it, we can't fit any more on there. So basically what this process allows you to do is quickly replicate any single object as many times as possible and fit it on the mat so that you can cut out as many as your mat will hold, basically. So one other thing I want to show you here is you can actually delete all of these just as quickly as you pasted them. If you take, click, and drag, okay, so what I'm doing is I'm clicking, I'm holding my mouse button down. You'll notice that as I move it with the mouse button down, I'm creating this box. You can take and drag this box around as many objects as you'd like, okay? So I've got the box, and anything inside that box, watch, when I let go of the mouse, it's going to select them all, okay? And I can actually size them all together as one piece. Okay, now watch, if I let go, okay, and if I click off of them, I can still click on these individually, okay? So basically, let's say I want to just select these 4 here. I'm going to draw a box around these, and you'll see that the handles down here, I can resize these. So you'll notice that these are still separated, and I can click on them individually. All right, I'm going to go ahead and delete these 4, okay? So what I did was I took my mouse, and I basically created a box and made sure to include all 4 of these shapes. When I let go, all 4 of them are selected, okay, and I can move all 4 of them. And if I just hit delete on my keyboard, it'll delete all 4 of them. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a box around these 4. I'm going to take them and move them to the middle of my mat. If I click off of these shapes, I can still select them individually. But let's say I want to take all 4 of these shapes and group them together into one shape, okay? What I can do is draw a box around these shapes. Okay, and then I can go to Object, and I can click Group. Okay, now notice that if I deselect it by clicking off of the mat and try to just select one, it doesn't work anymore. I basically have taken these 4 shapes and I've grouped them into one shape. Okay, now I know that they're not touching and they're not connected, but what I've basically done is I've told shortcuts a lot because I had all of these selected. I went to Object and I hit Group to basically keep these as one unit. Okay, now I can actually go in, because I have this selected, I can go to Object and I can ungroup it again. In case I want to make a modification, I can now click on each one individually. Okay, so that just kind of shows you the power of being able to group things. Okay, I'm going to show you another example. I'm going to get rid of this, and I'm going to hit delete on my keyboard. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and add some shapes from my shapes library. Okay, there's a heart, and I'm going to add another heart, and I'm going to add another heart. Okay, so now that I have my hearts on the mat, I'm going to draw a box around these hearts again, and that's going to select them all for me. Okay, now if that's all you have on your mat, let's say you have 3 hearts and you want to select them all, okay, you can create the box, or as an alternative, you can right click on the mat and click select all. And again, if you want to deselect them, you just deselect them. You just click away from them. Okay, so now again, I can go ahead and click these. Okay, and then I can go to Object and I can group them together. Okay, now deselecting them and reselecting them will basically bring them up as one group again, so I can resize them all together. I can also rotate them together, move them together, and then again I can go to Object and I can ungroup and then move them separately. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of these 2 smaller hearts, and I'm going to keep this big heart. I'm going to put them off to the side here. And I'm going to grab my type tool, and under the font section, I'm going to grab a nice font here, something bold, maybe Arial Black. And I'm going to click on the mat, and I'm going to type the word love. Okay. Now I'm going to grab my selection tool, and I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. I'm holding down Shift to keep it in proportion. Now let's say that you want to take and you want to move these letters separately or individually, because right now, basically anywhere I click, the only thing I can do is work with this word as a group. Okay, so Let's say that we want to have full control over each letter in this word. All right, so what we'll do is we'll highlight it. We're going to go to Object, and we're going to ungroup it. Okay, now notice that if we click, we can now move or manipulate each letter individually. Okay, so basically it's ungrouped the letters from that word, and we can do whatever we want with them. Okay, so let's say that all we wanted to do is just kind of move them and make them a little funky, you know, just to kind of spice it up a little bit so it's not just nice and straight. Okay, so we want it like that. And now let's say that we want to resize this, but we want to make sure that we resize them all to the same size. So what we can do now that we've moved them, I can go ahead and create a box around all 4 of these letters. Okay, so we're going to select them all, and we're going to go to Object, and we're going to group. Now if I click on any of them, they all highlight as a group, and I can resize them as a group. So now I know that when I resize it, everything's being resized the same way. Okay, so now I can take this and I can just put it on top here. And if we take a look, we can actually preview what our cut's going to look like by clicking on this preview button. Okay, so the red line here is going to cut out the heart, and then we're going to cut out the word love from the inside of that. Okay, so that's basically what this preview button does here. Okay, to take it even a step further, let's say that you want to make this entire design a little bit bigger. Well, we can resize each of these individual elements separately, or we can group them together. Let's draw a box around the heart and the word love. And then we can go to Object and click Group. And now you'll notice that no matter where I click, I can move this entire thing as if it were one piece. Okay, now I can resize it. Let's make it a little bit smaller. Or actually, let's make it about this big. Move it over here. And then do a copy. And let's do a paste autofill. So now we've got these little message hearts here. Okay, we can take them all, we can resize them, put them on the mat. So when you're ready to cut this, you can click on these little scissors here, the Cut with Cricut button, and doing so is going to bring up a window that asks you to select your Cricut model and your firmware version. So that you don't have to do this every single time, I'm going to hit Cancel, and I'll show you here, under Edit, Preferences, you can click on the Cutter tab and check this box that says Remember Cricut Model and Firmware, and click OK. So once we tell the software to remember the model and firmware version, clicking on this icon will get your cutting process started.